The night Adewale signed his first major contract, the city lights looked like stars that had fallen to the ground just to applaud him. His phone vibrated non-stop. Business partners, journalists, new friends who spoke fast and laughed loud. Somewhere between the champagne and the promises of more money, Adewale missed 12 calls from a number he used to know by heart. He glanced at the screen once, frowned, then turned it face down like a problem he would solve later. Success, he believed, did not wait for anyone who looked back. At home, in a quiet house far from the noise, his mother sat awake with the radio on low volume, waiting for a voice that never came. His wife folded children's clothes slowly, as if stretching time could pull him back through the door. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, carrying a strange stillness, as though something unseen had taken note of Adewale's first deliberate abandonment. Weeks turned into months, and Adewale learnt the language of distance fluently. He sent money but no words, excuses but no presence. When his wife asked when he would visit, he said soon, the way people say never without courage. The children stopped asking first. They learnt that unanswered questions hurt less when swallowed early. What Adewale didn't notice was how silence grows roots. The longer he stayed away, the heavier his absence became, pressing into the walls of the house he once ruled with laughter. Elders who passed by shook their heads quietly, for they knew a truth older than roads and phones. A man may outrun his home, but his home never forgets his footsteps. The city reshaped Adewale into someone sharp-edged and restless. He dressed better, spoke louder, and learned to smile without warmth. His new friends admired his ambition, not knowing the cost of it. They drank to the future and mocked the past, calling family a chain that slowed a man's climb. Sometimes, in rare moments before sleep, Adewale heard echoes, his mother's laugh, his daughter's voice mispronouncing his name. He would sit up, annoyed at himself, blaming stress or fatigue. He never guessed those echoes were reminders knocking gently before they learned how to knock hard. The call came on an ordinary afternoon. Adewale almost ignored it, thinking it was another demand, another distraction. When he finally answered, the voice on the other end trembled like a leaf caught in rain. His mother had fallen ill, suddenly, dangerously. He promised to come, again. But deadlines stacked themselves higher than guilt, and guilt was something he had trained himself to step over. By the time he cleared his schedule, the house that once waited for him had already closed its eyes in mourning. Adewale arrived dressed in black that felt borrowed, like grief that didn't quite fit. People greeted him with nods instead of embraces. No one accused him openly. They didn't need to. The space beside his mother's grave was accusation enough. His wife stood strong, her face carved by endurance. The children looked at him the way one looks at a story they no longer believe. That night, Adewale slept alone in his childhood room and dreamt of doors he could not open, no matter how hard he knocked. After the burial, Adewale returned to the city, but the city no longer welcomed him. Deals fell through, friends stopped calling, laughter sounded hollow like drums with torn skins. For the first time in years, Adewale sat alone in his expensive apartment and felt poor. When the lights went out during a storm, panic rose in his chest. In the darkness, he realized something terrifying. He had built a life that could collapse without witnesses. The silence answered him again, louder this time. Adewale's daughter showed up unannounced one evening, rain-soaked and trembling. She didn't hug him. She simply stood there, older than he remembered, holding years of unanswered questions in her eyes. She told him her mother was struggling, that the house felt empty even when full. For the first time in years, Adewale listened without defending himself. Her words landed like stones, heavy and honest. When she left, the apartment felt colder than before, as though the walls themselves judged him. Everything fell apart at once. His biggest investor pulled out. A lawsuit surfaced from a deal he barely remembered signing. The friends who once praised him disappeared like smoke at sunrise. Adewale sold his car, then his apartment, then his pride. One night, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes, Adewale laughed bitterly. He had chased success until it ran out of places to hide, and in the wreckage, one truth stood unbroken. The only place he had never fully lost was the place he abandoned. The journey home felt longer than any trip he had ever taken. Each mile carried memories he had buried under ambition. He wondered if the door would open or if he had waited too long again. As he approached the familiar house, his steps slowed. The walls looked older, but steadier. The gate creaked like an old man clearing his throat, announcing Adewale's return to a story he tried to escape. His wife opened the door and stood silently. No tears, no anger, just a long, careful look, as if measuring whether hope was worth the risk. She stepped aside, that was all. But in that small movement lived forgiveness's most powerful form, not forgetting, but allowing space for change. Living together again was awkward. Conversation stumbled. Trust rebuilt itself slowly, like a wounded leg learning to walk. Adewale did chores without being asked, listened more than he spoke, and learnt the children anew. At night, he lay awake, haunted by the years he could never return. Yet, each morning, the house greeted him with quiet endurance, teaching him that love survives even neglect, though it bears scars. An old associate called with a tempting offer, money, travel, a fresh start far away. Adewale felt the familiar pull, the old hunger waking up. For a moment, he imagined leaving again, justifying it with promises. Then he looked at his sleeping family and understood something painfully clear. Every time he chose ambition over them, he was not moving forward, he was running in circles. Adewale declined the offer. His voice shook, but it held. That night, he told his family everything. His fears, his failures, his shame. No masks, no defenses. His wife listened, tears finally falling. The children listened too, learning that strength sometimes sounds like confession. The house breathed easier, as if relieved by truth. Life didn't magically improve. Money was tight. Pride had to be buried daily. But Adewale worked honest jobs, came home tired, and slept peacefully for the first time in years. Neighbors noticed the change. Elders nodded with approval. The house, once strained by absence, slowly filled with laughter again, softer than before, but deeper. Regret still visited Adewale often, in dreams, in sudden memories, but now regret no longer ruled him, it instructed him. He learned to sit with it, to honor what was lost without abandoning what remained. His children began to trust him again, not because he promised perfection, but because he showed up. Another crisis hit, a medical emergency, bills piling high. Fear returned like an old enemy. But this time, Adewale didn't run. He stood firm, supported by hands he once let go. Together, the family endured. Together, they survived. And together, they discovered resilience stronger than success. Adewale was no longer the man the city had shaped. He was quieter, steadier, grounded. His wealth was modest, but his nights were rich with peace. He finally understood what his mother had tried to teach him long ago. A man is measured not by how far he goes, but where he returns to. The house seemed alive again, walls echoing with shared stories, meals filled with conversation. Adewale often paused to absorb the sound, afraid it might disappear. But it didn't, because this time he stayed. One evening, Adewale spoke to these children about his mistakes. He did not glorify them, he did not hide them. He offered them as warnings, as maps showing roads not to take. They listened, wiser than their years, knowing that family was not perfect, but it was permanent. Years later, Adewale sat on the porch watching his children laugh. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in forgiveness-colored light. He smiled, finally understanding what he had almost lost forever. Success may come and go, friends may fade, but family is the house that never truly closes its door, no matter how long you wander.